Greetings! Welcome to Wambui Made It. My name is Wambui Bahati. I do hope that you will enjoy this tutorial on how to loom knit a house sock. Now I call it a house sock because I enjoy working with bulky yarns. Therefore, I have loom knitted a bulky sock. I am going to take you step by step through how to do the cuff, the upper sock, the heel, the foot, and the toe. I do believe that some of you will be able to take what you see in the tutorial and create socks of various thicknesses. I think that the house sock is a great sock because if you have a house that is a no-shoe house, or you have a room in your house that is a no-shoe room, then these socks are perfect. These also make great gifts for someone who may be recovering from an illness either at home or in the hospital. About the sizing, I'm calling the sock that I'm demonstrating an average size sock. This sock will fit someone who wears a women's size 8, 8.5, somewhere in that area. This sock will fit them pretty comfortably. I suggest that you loom knit one of these socks, and after you have loom knitted this sock, you can just see how it fits or doesn't fit. And so you may decide that you need to add more rows or take away rows. You also may decide that you want the top of your sock to be shorter or taller, of course, by adding or taking away rows. The heel and the toe, the way it is demonstrated in the tutorial, will remain the same no matter how many rows you decide to add or take away. If you feel that your calf needs more room, then I would suggest something like this Flexi Loom to help you to add pegs in increments of 2s until you have a calf size that feels comfortable for you or the person that you're making the sock for. Now, I know some of y'all have probably looked at the timestamp and said, this video is too long, and it is longer than I like for videos to be. However, when I'm doing a tutorial, I like to include everyone. So oftentimes during the tutorial, I'm speaking and demonstrating as if I'm speaking to someone that may be new to loom knitting. I do go into detail and I do tend to repeat a lot. However, I have broken the video up into chapters. Look below in the description box. Find where you want to be when you're ready to skip ahead and go right to that place. With that said, you know what? Let's loom knit a house sock. These are the things that we're going to need in order to loom knit our socks. Of course, the first thing is we need some yarn. The yarn that I'm going to be using in this tutorial is Charisma by Loops and Threads. This is acrylic, and this color is called Rose Garden. Of course, we need our hook or our pick, a darning needle, and it's going to be very important to have a row counter or some way to keep up with the rows that you are loom knitting, because we want to make sure that both of our socks have the same amount of rows so that both of our socks will be the same size. We're going to need some scissors later, and of course the loom. The loom that I'm going to be using is a 24 peg loom, and I have marked it with nail polish. Where you see my red nail polish, that's going to let me know I'm going to purl on those pegs. And of course, the ones without nail polish, I'm going to knit those. So once we do the initial cast on with an E-wrap cast on, okay, we're going to do 5 rows of knit, purl, knit, purl. And when I say knit, I mean E-wrap stitch. Okay, so we're going to E-wrap, purl, E-wrap, purl, E-wrap, purl, all around for the 24 pegs for 5 rows, and that's how we're going to get that little cuff that we have right here. Okay? All right, so that's one of the things that we want to mark. The other thing we want to mark is we want to mark halfway, so that we want to designate half of our loom because we're going to be using exactly half of our loom when we get ready to do the heel. We need to know where the half is. For instance, this is a 24 peg loom. So half of 24 is 12. So we're going to mark from 1, and we're going to count all the way until we get to that 12th peg, and we're going to mark it in a way that stands out for us too. So if you're using a 26 peg loom, then you would cut that in half and you would mark your first peg, and then you would mark your 13th peg. I believe most of us will be using a 24 peg loom, at least initially. And so we're going to mark the first peg, whichever peg you designate as your first peg. Going to mark that, then you're going to count to 12, and then you're going to put a marking on that 12th peg. That's going to be very important because we're going to need to know where those 12 pegs are when we get ready to do the heel as well as the toe in this sock. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out about 12 or 13 inches. We're going to have an extra long tail for this project to begin. And then we're going to make our loop. So pull out about 12, 13 inches or so. And then we're going to make our loop. The way I make my loop is I take the 2 yarns and I put one on top of the other. Like that. I have my tail yarn, and then we have something that looks like an awareness ribbon. I then take my 2 fingers here, put them through the loop, and I pick up the tail yarn. While I'm holding the tail yarn, I pull the tail yarn and the working yarn until I get a loop, and it's an adjustable loop. Okay, so that's how I make my loops. However you know to make a loop, you make the loop that you know how to make. And once you have the loop, so we'll have a long tail right here, and then we'll have this yarn, which is attached to the ball, and we're calling that the working yarn, okay? So you take your loop, you're gonna find whatever peg you have decided is your first peg, and you're gonna put the loop around the first peg. So I'm gonna put it around my first peg, and then I'm gonna tighten it up a little bit, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both strands, okay? Going to take both of them, and I'm going to start e-wrapping. I'm going to wrap, 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 and I'm going to do this around the whole loom. And soon I'm going to run out of the tail yarn, and I'll just have the 1 yarn, and I'll continue with that one with the working yarn now. And I'm just going to continue all around. We're just e-wrapping, e-wrapping, and now we're at our last peg. There's our first peg that we put the loop on. So we're just going to continue right across. We're going to just keep going. And now we're putting 2 loops on each peg. We're adding a second loop because to make a e-wrap stitch, to complete it, you have to pull the bottom loop up over the top loop. So we're going to put 2 loops on each of these pegs. And now we have come back to our last peg. Every loop has 2. We're counting these double loops here as 1, okay? So everything has 2 loops on it. We're going to hold this while we pull the bottom over the top. Once we have done that on that last peg, now we can let that go. And now we're going to pull these bottoms over the top. All right. And we're going to treat those 2 yarns that we started out with as if they were 1, and we're just going to pull them over the top. Okay. Okay, we're back at our last peg, and every peg now only has 1 loop on it. Okay, now we're ready to start our cuff here. This is where we're going to be using the markings on our loom, And so the first, my number 1 peg has no mark on it, so I know that I'm going to do an E-wrap stitch on that. And so we're going to do this part right here. We're going to do 5 rows where we alternate between a E-wrap stitch and a purl stitch. Okay, so I'm going to start right here on my first peg, and I'm going to do an E-wrap and pull the bottom over the top. And now I'm going to do a purl. For a purl, you lay the yarn across the peg, take your hook, go underneath that top, and go under and then over and scooch it up. You're going to take everything off and put the new loop back on. Okay, and now we're going to, do a purl here. I'm sorry, we're going to do an E-wrap here, bottom over the top. Now we're going to do a purl, lay the purl across the peg, go underneath that first loop, over, pull it up, take everything off, put the new loop back on. And now we're ready to do an E-wrap, wrap, bottom over the top. Okay, purl, lay it across the peg, go underneath the top loop and over and scooch it up. Take everything off, put the loop back on, the new loop back on. And now we're going to E-wrap, up over the top, lay the yarn across the peg, go underneath the top loop and over that bottom yarn, pull it up, take everything off, put the new loop back on. We're going to E-wrap, wrap, up over the top. And now we're going to lay it across because we're doing a purl. We're going to go underneath and over, scooch it up, take everything off, put the new loop back on. We're going to E-wrap, and then we're going to pull the bottom over the top. We're going to lay this across the peg, go underneath and over. Okay, so that's what we're going to do until we get back to our last and or first peg. So we're going to remember your pegs. That's why the markings are so important to keep up with where you're supposed to be, especially if the phone rings or something and you have to put it down. It's really important to be able to say, oh yes, I'm supposed to be doing a E-wrap right here. Now we're coming up to our last peg. All right, so now we're ready to start a second row. We're back at our first peg. So this is where we would take our counter and say, okay, we've done 1 row. So now we want to do 4 more. So we're going to start again, just like we did before, on the same pegs that we E-wrapped on before. We're going to E-wrap on those pegs again. The same pegs that we purled on, we're going to purl on those pegs again. And so we're going to start with the E-wrap right here. And now I'm going to do a purl. And this is what we're going to do. I'm going to come back when I'm near the end of my 5th row. This is my last purl here in the 5th row. All right, so we got 5 rows of alternating E-wraps and purls, and it should look something like this. Now we're ready to do this part of the sock. We just did this part. Now we're going to do the upper part before the heel. We're going to do 20 rows. These are all E-wrap stitches. We're going to do 20 rows of E-wrap stitches. And then, of course, I'll show you how to do the heel. So just go ahead. Let's get started. We're going to do 20 rows of E-wrap stitches. I'll just do a couple with you, and then I'll be back when I'm finishing up the 20th row. You know what? I need to set this. Let me make sure I set this back to 0. Okay. And we're just going to wrap, 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 wrap. When you get back to your last peg, hold it until you pull that bottom over the top. Now you can let go, and then we're just going to go all around, pulling the bottom over the top. And this is what we're going to do for 20 rows. I'm going to go ahead and complete this first row, and then I'll be back at the end of the 20th row. Okay, we have only one loop on all the pegs. We have finished up at our last peg. We're getting ready to start in the first peg. We have done one row, all right? And so we can push everything down to give room for the wraps, since we're only doing E-wraps now. We're not doing any pearls right now. We're just going to continue that. So this is our first peg. We're going to wrap, and we're just going to continue to E-wrap, make E-wrap rows until we have 20 rows. Okay, I'll see you back later. I have just finished my 19th row. Okay, so I'm going to start my 20th row right now. So we're just going to E-wrap. I'm pulling the loops down as I go so that I have room to wrap the new loop on top. And now we are back at our last peg. We're going to pull that bottom over the top. Okay, and now we're going to pull all these bottoms up and over to complete this last row of the E-wrap stitch. Okay, so that is 20. We are now ready to move on to the next section, and that section is the heel section. So now I'm going to go very slowly here so that everybody can understand how to make themselves a sock heel. Understand that there are several ways that people make their heel. This just happens to be the way that I think that was easiest for me and that I thought would be easiest to follow. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you right now. Let's make the heel. The first thing we want to do is we want to take our counter and put it back to 0. Okay, we're going to get our loom and we're going to push everything down. We're getting ready to make our heel. Okay, we want to make sure that we have marked our first peg and that we have marked what is the halfway peg. So we determined that on the 24 peg loom, we want to make sure we have a mark that we can see or a marker that we can see on peg 1. And we want to make sure that we can have a marker that we can see on peg 12. Again, whatever your halfway point is, you want to have a marker on that peg and the first peg. Okay, so all we're going to be dealing with now is from 1 to 12. Okay, 1 to 12 is all we're going to see and all we're going to deal with. The first thing we want to do to start our heel is we're going to take our working yarn. We're going to start like we would normally start by wrapping around peg 1, and we're going to E-wrap peg 1 all the way to peg 12. The goal is to E-wrap 4 rows. So we're going to E-wrap 4 rows, only going from peg 1 to peg 12. Okay, so we're going to E-wrap. We're going to start like normal, peg 1, and we're going to E-wrap every peg until we get to the halfway peg, or that 12th peg if you're using a 24 peg loom. So here we are at that 12th peg. We're going to hold that yarn while we pull the bottom up over the top. Okay, I'm going to push this up a little to help me pull that over the top. Okay, now that we've done that, we're going to go back the other way, pulling the bottoms over the top. Okay, so that's our first row. We want to do 4 rows. When we get to the heel section, we want to start the heel by doing 4 rows of E-wrap stitches. And so that's our first row. Now we're going to go back the other way. We're only dealing with these 12 pegs. Okay, so we're going to push everything down. Okay, find the working yarn. And now from that 12th row, we're going to go back to peg 1. So we're going to wrap over, under, just go back, all the way back, just wrapping the E-wrap until we get to peg 1. When we get to peg 1, oops, mine started to unravel. When we get to peg 1, okay, we're going to hold that there while we get our pick. We're going to pull this up over the top, and we're just going to go right back. Okay. We have done our second row of the E-wrap stitch. We're going to push it down again. Find our working yarn, and we're going to come right back to the 12th peg. So we're going to just E-wrap these 12 pegs. Okay, this is our 12th peg. Going to wrap that. We're going to hold that, get our pick, lift that bottom over the top, and now we're going to go all the way down, lifting the bottoms over the top. Now that is our third row. We're going to push everything down. We're going to do one more row of E-wraps. Okay, so our working yarn is here on the 12th peg. We're just going to wrap and do the E-wrap all the way back to peg 1. All right, we're back at peg 1. We're going to hold that until we can pull the bottom over the top, and then we're just going to finish this row. Okay, we have done 4 rows All right, we have started our heel. So we have 4 rows of E-wraps. We're ready to do the second part of our heel. So we have those 4 E-wrap rows. We're going to decrease a little bit. What our goal is, and it sounds more difficult than it is, but I just want to let you know what our goal is, what we're going for. Okay, what we're going for is we want to have these 3 pegs on each end, right here. We want these 3, and then these last 3 on this side to be empty. The way we're going to do that is we are going to one by one lift up this loop, the last loop, and move it in. But we're not going to do that all at one time. Here's how we're going to do that, okay? So let me just make sure everybody's with me. The goal is we want to have these 3, the first 3 pegs here, empty, and then over at the 12th peg, or the last peg that you're using for your heel, you want those last 3 pegs empty. And this is how we're going to do that. You're going to look at your working yarn. Your working yarn should be at your number 1 peg. Okay, here's your working yarn. All right, you're going to go to the opposite end. You're going to see that last loop that's on that 12th peg here. We're going to lift this up and we're going to move it in. Okay, so we're going to take that off and we're going to move it in one. Okay, now this one is empty. Okay, we're going to go back to our working yarn. Because, well, first we're going to push all this down, because when we go back to our working yarn, we are going to E-wrap this row. Okay, we're going to make an E-wrap row. Okay, so we're going to just go like normal. We're going to make sure we catch that first peg right there. And we are going to E-wrap all of these pegs, until we get to the one that has the 2 loops on it. So the one that's empty, we're done with that for now. We're not going to use that one right now. We have 2 loops because we moved this one in over here. So now we have 2 loops here. We're going to pull both of these loops up and over. And then we're just going to do like normal E-wrap. We're just going to pull the bottoms over the top. All right, so now we're back at our first peg. We're going to look to see where our working yarn is. Now our working yarn is on this end. So we're going to go always to the opposite end when we're ready to move a loop in. So here's our working yarn. We're going to go to the opposite end and we're going to get that loop and we're going to move it in one, okay? There you go. And now we're going to push all of this down because we are going to E-wrap back the other way. So we're just going to E-wrap. All right, and now we're back at the peg with the 2, and we're going to pull each of these up and over, and then we're going to do our regular E-wrap pull over. Now let's see where we are. On this end, we have 1 empty peg, and on this end, we have 1 empty peg. Okay, we're going to look to see where our working yarn is. Our working yarn is over here by the beginning side. So we're going to go to the opposite side. See the last peg that has a loop in our group of 12. We're going to lift that off and we're going to move that one in. Okay, and then we're going to push everything down we're going to take our yarn and E-wrap all the way back until the last loop that has loops on it. That's this one here. It has 2 loops. Okay, so we're going to take 1 loop over, 2 loops over, and then we're going to do all of the bottoms over the top. Okay, look for your working yarn. Your working yarn is over here now. So we always want to go to the opposite side. We're going to go over here to the first loop that we see now on this side. We're going to lift that loop up and move it in 1. And then we're going to push everything down. And we're going to E-wrap all the way back to the peg with the 2 loops. All right, and so now we're going to lift this one up and over, this one up and over, and then we're going to go right through the whole section here. All right, let's see what we have. So right here now we have 2 empty pegs on this end, and we have 2 empty pegs on this end. So our goal is to have 3. Once we get the 3 empty pegs on each end, then we're going to do something else. We'll go on to the next section of our heel. Okay, so we're going to look for the working yarn. Working yarn is here. So if the working yarn is here, we want to go to the opposite end to lift and move in. All right, move in 1. Okay, then we're going to push everything down. We're going to get our working yarn and we're going to E-wrap all the way until we get to the peg with the 2 loops. Okay, we're going to pull 1 and 2, and then we're just going to pull the bottoms up over the top. All right, okay, let's see where we are. Okay, so on this end, we have 3 empty pegs. That's what we want. On this end, we have 2. We need 1 more. So we're going to look at where our working yarn is. Over here, we're going to go to the opposite side over here. We're going to lift up this loop on the end and move it in. Then we're going to push everything down. Then we're going to E-wrap until we get to the peg with the 2 loops. Okay, then we're going to pull the first loop over, the second loop over, and then we're going to pull all the bottoms in this section up and over. So now we have something that looks like this, and we have these spaces on the side. So what we're going to do now is we're going to fill in those spaces. So that's going to be the next section that we're going to do for our heel. This section of the heel that we're going to be working on is going to be closing these little gaps that we have on either side. And the way that we're going to close these gaps is, first of all, I want you to see your 3 empty pegs. All right, your 3 empty pegs. We want to include in this closing up process not only the 3 pegs that are empty, but each peg on either side. So in essence, we are going to be working with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pegs. Okay, so we get 5 pegs because we're going to be working with the 3 pegs that we took the loops off of completely. And now we're going to do something to these 3 pegs. but we're going to include the pegs on the outside. That's going to give us 5. So we're going to be focused on these 5 pegs. And so the ones on the outside do have a loop. They still have their loop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to do the exact same thing that we're going to do on one side. We're going to do it on the other side. It doesn't matter which side you decide to start on. What we're going to do is you're going to take your hook, and what we want to do is go in. First of all, before we move anything, we're going to see if we can't identify 5 loops, because what we're going to do is we're going to find a loop to fit on each of these pegs. So this is our first peg we're going to do, which is on the outside of this empty peg right here. So we're going to go in and we're just going to find a loop here. There's a loop. We're going to take that loop and put it on top of the peg. That's what we're going to do. So I see already at least four loops that I can use. I'm going to come to this end. It doesn't matter which order you go in, but I'm going to come on this end. I'm going to get this loop, and I'm going to put this loop on top of this peg, around that peg. All right. And so now I see 3 loops, 1, 2, 3, and I have 3 pegs left. So I'm going to go in and get this loop. All right. And we're just going to get the loop and put it on top, put it around the peg. Let's see, like that, like that. And then we're going to go get the next loop that we can find, and we want to stay on the edge, as close to the edge as possible. We're going to put that loop around that peg. Okay. And then I see one more loop here. I'm going to get that loop and I'm going to put that around this peg. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to find a loop on the edge to fit on each of these pegs. Okay. So we have a loop on each of our pegs. In fact, we have 2 on the ones on the end right here. Okay. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. So we're going to come over here. And so I'm going to pick up a loop here and I'm going to put it on this peg. And then I like to go to the other end, but you can do it any order you want to. But I see a loop here. I'm going to take this loop and I'm going to put it on top of this peg right here. All right. So I'm going to get this loop right here. And I'm going to put this loop on this peg. All right. Here's a loop here. I'm going to get that loop and put it on this peg. All right. And now here's one loop right here. I'm going to get that loop and I'm going to put it on this empty peg right here. Okay, so now we don't have the gaps anymore. You should have something that looks like this. Once we've closed up the gaps, now our heel, for all intents and purposes, is finished. We're going to find our working yarn, and it should be in around the 4th peg. So that was our first peg. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is where we left our working yarn. What we're going to do is we're going to start right where we are. So we're not at the beginning. We're going to start wherever our working yarn is, and we're going to wrap. And we're going to keep wrapping. We're just going to wrap all around on every peg until we get back to the last peg. We're not going to pass the last peg. So we're going to just E-wrap, E-wrap. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go the whole length around the loom, and we're going to be pulling the bottoms over the top so that we only have one loop left on each peg. So we started at our fourth peg and we went around and we came back to our last peg. So when we did that revolution, we did not wrap these first pegs here. Okay, so we just started where our working yarn was and we went around. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go around and we're going to pull the bottom loops up over the top. Okay, we want to make sure there's only one loop left on each peg. Now that we have one loop on every peg, we're going to push everything down. And now we are ready to, okay, so we just did the heel. That's what we just did. And so now we're going to do the foot part. All right. So for the foot part, we're going to do 22 rows. So our foot section is going to be the same stitches that we used for the top. We're going to E-wrap for 22 rows. So I'm going to make sure this is set back to 0. All right. And now we're going to just start E-wrapping, and we're going to E-wrap 22 rows. You know what to do. Bottoms over the top. And I'm just going to go ahead and finish this first row with you. And that is our first row. Okay, we want to do a total of 22. I'll come back when I'm finishing up and my 22nd row. "22 rows. Now that we have 22 rows, we have our heel over here, starting to look like a sock. What we're going to do now is the toe. So this is the toe that we're going to do. The good news about making this toe is that this toe is going to be made with the same, we're going to start off with the same stitches, the same pattern. Everything we did to make the heel, we're going to use those same exact stitches and pattern in order to make the toe. So let's make the toe. The first thing we want to do before we actually start loom knitting the toe is we want to push all of the loops down so that we have room for the E-wraps that we're going to be doing. So push everything down. Once we've done that, we want to make sure that our row counter is at 0. Okay, so when I tell you that to make the toe of this sock is the exact same thing that we did to make the heel, that's exactly what we're going to do. I am going to go slow though. I'm going to act as if we have not done that pattern before, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to go slow and explain everything just like I did when we were doing the heel, because there may be some people who are just looking for how to do a toe, and they may scrub through the beginning of the video to get to the toe. And so I want them to be able to understand how to do the toe if that's the one thing or the only thing they need to know. So bear with me. Okay, so we're gonna start. We're only gonna be using half of the loom. So we have marked the first peg and we have marked the 12th peg because this is a 24 peg loom. So whatever the halfway mark is on your loom, mark that as well as number 1. Okay, so once you have those marked, understand we're only going to be working on that half of the loom. So we're going to start like normal on peg 1, and we're going to go right across until we get to that 12th peg or whatever the middle way peg number is on your loom that you're using. So here's our 12th peg. I'm going to wrap that, and then I'm going to hold that. We are going to do 4 rows of just the regular E-wrap stitch. All right, so we're going to go back and forth. All right, so that's our first row. And now we're going to go back the other way. So we're going to push all these things down. All right. And we're going to go around that 12th peg and go back until we get to the first peg. And then we're going to wrap the first peg. I'm going to hold that while we pull the bottom over the top. Okay. Okay, that's our second row. And now we're going to push everything back down because we're going to E-wrap going back in the opposite direction. Okay, so we're going to always wrap the first peg, wrap, wrap, wrap. This is our halfway peg, our 12th peg. Going to wrap that. Okay, row 3, and we're going to push everything down again. And we're going to go back the other way. Wrap and stop at the first peg. And that is our 4th row. So once we've done our 4th row, we are going to find our working yarn. Okay, this is the second part of the toe. We're going to find our working yarn. Okay, wherever our working yarn is, we're going to go to the opposite end. So of those 12 pegs we've been working on, we're going to find the working yarn, go to the opposite end. What we're going to do at the opposite end is lift the loop up and put it on top of the next one. Move it one in. Okay, the goal, and again, I'm explaining this for those people who may just be watching this to learn how to do a toe. The goal is to get 3 pegs, the first 3 pegs and the last 3 pegs empty by moving a loop in just like I just did. So I took the loop off of this one, I put it on top here, I moved it in 1. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to push everything down, because we're going to now take the working yarn, wrap around the first peg, and continue to wrap until we get to the last peg on the side that we're working with. But we only want to stop, we're going to stop at the one that has loops on it. The one that's empty, we're not going to do anything else to it right now. Okay, so now we have 3 loops on here because we moved 1 off of here. So we're just going to take the bottom up and over, bottom up and over, and now we're just going to go down through all of these wraps, pulling the bottom over the top until we get back to the first peg in this section. Okay, now that we've done that, we're going to look for our working yarn. Our working yarn is over here. So we're going to go to the opposite end of this section, and we are going to take this loop off and place it on top one end, okay? And then we're going to push everything down. We are going to wrap. We're not going to bother any of the pegs that we have removed all the loops. If it's an empty peg, we don't do anything to it. Okay, so we're going to just wrap until we get back to the one with the double loops. We're going to pull one over, the second one over, and then we're just going to go straight down until we get to the end of this section. Okay, now what we want to do is look for our working yarn. Our working yarn is over here now, so we're going to go to the opposite side, and that's the side where we're going to take the last loop in this section and move it in 1. All right, once we've moved it in, we're going to push everything down in this section, and we're going to take our yarn. We're not any of the pegs that don't have anything on them, we're not going to touch them. So we're going to start here with this peg that has a loop right there, and we're going to go back the other way. And again, we're going to stop on the peg that has the 2 loops, and we're going to lift up and off and up and off, and we're going to go back the other way. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to first check to make sure that we haven't passed 3. So over on this side, we have 2 pegs that are empty. The goal is to get 3 pegs empty on this side and 3 pegs empty on this side. So we only have 1 empty peg over here, and we have 2 over here. Where is the working yarn? The working yarn is over here now. So we're going to go to the opposite side to remove the loop and move it in 1, okay? And then we're going to push everything down, and then we're going to E-wrap all of the pegs that have loops on them. And we're going to stop with the peg that has 2, and we're going to take it up and over, and then we're going to go to each of these pegs. Okay, and now we're going to look for the working yarn. Working yarn is over here now. So we're going to go to the opposite side to get this loop right here and move it in one. Okay, we're going to push everything down, and we're going to E-wrap back the other way. All right, and now we're going to lift 1 and 2, and then we're going to go all the way back. All right, let's just check. Okay, on this end, we have 1, 2, 3 pegs that are empty. Okay, so we don't want to remove any more from this end. On this end, we have 2 pegs that are empty. So we need 1 more. Where's the working yarn? The working yarn is over here. So that works out great because we're going to go to the opposite side, get the last loop and move it in 1. Okay, then we're going to push everything down. And we are going to E-wrap on the pegs that have loops on them. Okay, we have 2 over here. So 1, 2, up, 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 and there. Okay, let's check. We need 3 pegs empty on this end. We have 3 pegs over here that have no loops on them right here. Let's see. The other side, we have 1, 2, 3 pegs that have no loops on them. Okay, we're ready to go on to the last part of making our toe. All right, so now we have something that looks like this, and we have gaps over here on both sides. So what we're going to do is going to go ahead and push this down. It doesn't matter which side you want to start on first. What you want to do is we want to find a loop on the edge here for these 3 pegs, but not only those 3 pegs, we want to do these 3 pegs, and we want to add another loop to this peg and another loop to this peg. In other words, instead of dealing with 3 pegs, we're going to be dealing with 5. The 3 that we took all the loops off of, and 1 on each side. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at our little section here, where our gap is, and we're going to go to the edge, and we're going to just find a loop, the closest loop you can, to put on. You're going to put a loop on this peg and then each of these pegs. So here's a loop right here. I'm going to take this loop and I'm going to put it on that peg right there. And then I'm going to go to the other end and I'm going to get a loop and put it on that peg. I'm going to go here. I see a loop that I'm going to put on that peg. And then I see a loop here for this peg. And it doesn't matter what order you're doing it in. And then you just want to make sure you have a loop for every single peg that was over here. Now everything has a loop over here, okay? We're going to go to the opposite side, and again, it doesn't matter which side you start on. We're going to do the same thing. We see our 3 pegs that have no loops on them. And we're also, when we're putting loops on though, we're going to include the 1 peg on each side. So that's going to give us 5 pegs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we're dealing with. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to look at the ends here, the edge, and we want to see if we see any loops here that we can use, the closest loop to each peg. And we're just going to pick up a loop, and we're going to take the loop, and I'm going to put that one on that peg. Now we got the 3 in the center and this one over here. And I'm going to go over here and get this one. And I'm going to put a loop over there. And now I'm going to put a loop here. I'm going to get this loop right here. And I'm going to put this loop over here. And I'm going to get this loop right here. And I'm going to put this loop on top of that peg right there. Okay, so now we have something that looks like we're making another heel, but believe me, this is the toe. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to push everything down. The next thing we're going to do, and we're no longer working on half the loom. We're through working with the section. We're working on the whole loom now, but we're going to go to where the working yarn is. And wherever that working yarn is, we're going to start e-wrapping, and we're going to wrap all around, and we're going to stop at what was originally our last peg. Okay, so we're just going to start where the working yarn is, and we're going to e-wrap all around. And this originally, where the anchor peg is, this was our last peg. So we're going to wrap that, and we're going to pull all the loops up and over. Okay, so we're going to go the whole distance around this loom. And what we want to do is leave every peg with only one loop. So whenever you get to a peg that has 2 loops, then you're going to take one and pull it over. All right. And we're going to do that. We just want to make sure every peg ends up with only one loop. Okay. So every peg should have only one loop now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the working yarn, and we're going to wrap it around once. We're going to wrap it around twice, and then we'll just have a little, maybe we're saying 2.5, okay? We're going to take our scissors, and we're going to cut the yarn. We're going to take our darning needle, and now we're going to thread our needle. Okay, so it should look something like that. Okay, all right, and we're going to go by the working yarn again, and we're going to go next to the working yarn, where the working yarn is. We're going to go into this peg next to it. We're going to go down, pick up that loop and take it off, and we're going to pull the yarn through. Okay. We're going to go to the opposite side now, next door over here. We're going to get this loop, pull it off, and we're going to pull the yarn through. Okay, we're going to come back on the other side now. We're going to get this loop, pull it off, pull all of the yarn through. We're going to go back on the other side now, get this one, pull it off, pull all of the yarn through. I think you get the idea. We're going to be going back and forward. Okay, so we're going to come back on this side, pick that off, pull all of the yarn through, get it all through. And then go back on the other side, take that one off, and pull all of the yarn through. See it all through before you move on. Okay, it's through. Come back on the other side. Gonna pick this one up, pull it off, pull all the yarn through. Okay, we're gonna go back over here to this other side, pick this one off, and pull all of the yarn through. All right, we're gonna come back on the other side, pick this one up, pull it off, pull all of the yarn through. All right, go back on the other side, pick it off, pull all of the yarn through. And we do want to pull it through before we go to the next one because it can get a little tangled. Okay, we got that through. We're going to come back to this other side over here. All right, pick this one off and pull all of the yarn through. All right, we're going to go back on this side over here now. We're going to take this one, pull it off, pull the yarn through. Okay, come back on this side, pick up this one, pull all the yarn through. Now we're ready to go back on the other side. We're going to get this one right here, pull it off, and pull all of the yarn through. Okay, so we may need to adjust the yarn because we want to keep a single piece of yarn. Okay, and we're going to come back to the other side now. Pick that off, pull the yarn through. Okay, we're going to go back over here now. And we're going to come over here, and we're going to pick this off and pull the yarn through. Okay, and now we're going to go back over here on the other side. We're going to take this off, pull the yarn through. All right, we're going to come back over here now. We're going to get this one, pull that off, pull all of the yarn through. Gonna go take this one, take it off, pull the yarn through. We're gonna come back over here. We're gonna get this one right here, take it off, and we're gonna pull the yarn through. Go on the opposite side. Get this one, take it off, pull the yarn through. We're gonna come back over here, opposite side. Get this one, pull the yarn through. Go to the opposite side over here, get that one, pull it off, pull the yarn through. We have one more. You're going to take that off and pull the yarn through. Okay, we're going to pull the yarn through. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to pull this yarn. We want to tighten up this corner over here. So we're going to pull the yarn. Let's see if we just can't pull. Yeah, just pull the yarn. Pull the yarn, and there we have our toe. So that's what the back of our toe looks like. And this is what the front of our toe looks like. Now, of course, we have to tighten that up. We're going to take our needle, and right where we have this last loop right here, we're going to just go in around these last two loops and pull the yarn out over here. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go inside. All right, I'm going to go ahead, find that needle, and we're actually going to pull the needle, and we're going to be turning it inside out at the same time if we can. We want to turn it inside out. All right, so we just want this toe to be out here, inside out. Okay, so now we got this. We're going to pull it a little tight. We're just going to take this needle and we're going to like circle the yarn around, and we're going to put our needle in so that we're inside. So it looks like that. And then we're just going to pull. Okay. All right, going to pull. And then what we're going to do, going to pull it tight. And we're going to cut it. All right. We're going to turn it inside out. And this is our sock. All right, so we have a little cuff here, we have a heel, we have a foot, and we have a pretty nice looking toe, I think.